So you rounded up a few articles for us to hit really quick. It's been a few weeks since we've really touched on like Vikings news.
Yep.
And of course, we're kind of in the like lull of the off season here. Most of the players aren't even at the facility. They're on vacation, sipping Mai Tais on the beach.
And good for them.
Something, you know. So not a lot of news coming out of the NFL right now. But of course there are some storylines that we're following, and with a lot of the stuff that's happened in the off season, that has kind of dictated a lot of what could happen. That the writing is starting to kind of appear on the wall a little bit, so to speak, in terms of what could happen here in the future. So we got a couple of things here to talk about. First, we could talk about Dalton Risner. So the Vikings brought him back, which is exciting. And Dustin Baker, our friend of the show, wrote an article talking about how that could be kind of an undercover roster battle.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all super stoked, or most fans were pretty stoked when they re-signed Risner. I feel like at worst you just didn't care, because he's not a player that, I don't think he's very divisive. It's just, I feel like you either love Risner and are super happy that he's on the team again, or, I mean, you can take him or leave him. I think we were both in the camp of, we like the guy. He's a good dude. He's great in the locker room. He seems to be very good on the field, and the offensive line in general in 2023 seemed to skyrocket pretty good once he cracked the starting lineup. Now, there's probably some factors to that. I don't know if maybe something was going on with Ezra Cleveland, who obviously is very good. He just got a pretty decent contract with Jacksonville. Or maybe Ed Ingram started to figure some things out that he hadn't been figuring out, or the ball just bounced the Vikings' way a couple of times as far as the offensive line went, you know. But yeah, he did seem to be an upgrade last year, and we were both excited when he signed. However, when he did sign, once we figured out the details, it was like the same or even less money than Blake Brandel is getting, which, hey, if Brandel gets the starting job and if he's the guy, then that's fine. That's awesome. I think we're both fans of the team first and then the players. But yeah, Dustin Baker's article kind of talks about how that is going to end up being more of a battle for Risner to get a starting job, whether it's on the left or right at the guard spot. And he kind of outlines too, Dustin Baker had a tweet sometime in the last week or so. It was a poll and basically asking like, hey, Vikings fans, if you had to choose, if it was up to you, if you had to choose, what would your combination of starting guards be? And he listed out the handful of combination of guards with Risner, Brandel, and Ingram, all options at the various spots. And what did that poll end up looking like, Ev?
Yeah, so the majority says they would prefer, or they think the most likely outcome is Risner on the left and Ingram on the right.
Interesting. Okay.
41.6%. What I find interesting about the poll is the next most popular option was Risner and Brandel, left and right. Ingram on the bench.
Which is interesting. I think it also, that kind of shows what fans do and don't really know. Fans like you and me, we like the names. You know, we like the team first, obviously, but we also like the names. And we saw Risner be the guy to make things step up, like I just said. So we automatically think, oh, they signed Risner back, pencil him in, he is the starting guard. But then we also know Brandel has kind of been there a little bit. Some fans still remember the struggles that Ed Ingram had his first season and then the first couple of games of last season. So I can see kind of why a poll like that might end up with Risner or Brandel rather than Risner and Ingram. I could also see any one of those combinations be true. And frankly, as fans, and something Dustin said on our show just a handful of weeks ago, we should be pretty comfortable trusting Kevin O'Connell and his regime in their decisions on the offensive line, because they tend to be productive decisions regardless of who's in there. We should just thank thank the coaches and trust that they know what they're doing, because they've proven that they've known what they're doing. The line is one of the better ones in the league.
I think our offense will have a little bit of an identity crisis to figure out.
To begin with, yeah.
Because it's been Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson for so long. And that's made the offense, and naturally it's been this way with Kevin O'Connell calling the plays too, just naturally a pass-heavy scheme, which has worked really well when you have a high-level quarterback throwing to the best receiver in the league, whenever he's not double and triple teamed.
Even so.
Even then, he still makes amazing catches. So I think this position battle specifically will come down to what is our offensive identity going to be. Risner started last year because we were a pass-heavy offense. We didn't have a run game to speak of, and his biggest flaw is that he's not a run blocker.
Yeah. He is a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker.
Yes. That's better said. But I think Risner, Brandel, it's going to come down to, are we a run-first offense or a pass-first offense? And that remains to be seen. We don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be.
At this moment, if there was a game tomorrow, it'd be Sam Darnold, yeah.
But, there's a lot still to be determined that way. Training camp is a whole other thing. Preseason. And it's all new. We're dealing with all new stuff in terms of those offense skill position players, running backs and quarterbacks specifically. So a lot remains to be seen, and I think that will determine who gets the starting job and who doesn't.
Yeah, and like I said, I feel like as fans, really with any position, but this battle specifically, whatever shakes out, we should be able to trust the coaches, and I think whatever the coaches decide, it will be a vetted decision, a thought-out decision, and one that will be the best for the team. What would be great, and I think just it's already a positive, is the fact that we're saying Brandel, a guy who has been, the sixth offensive lineman for many years now, to even talk about him as a potential starting candidate. That should give us some confidence in him, because the coaches wouldn't have made the moves they did, waited so long to sign Risner the way they did if they didn't have confidence in Brandel. They would have, and maybe they tried, but they would have signed some big name free agent guard. I don't even know who was or wasn't available a few months ago, but they would have fought a lot harder to upgrade that position, but they didn't. So we should already, just based off that, feel pretty good about Brandel as a player.
Yeah, and I don't have anything negative to say about Brandel. Risner quickly elevated himself to like a fan favorite, just kind of with his post-game locker room interviews, and even some of just the stuff we caught on the field. The leg kick is something that comes to mind. But he's definitely, Risner's got the bigger personality. Brandel's a little more, I'm comfortable to kind of be in the background and do my job in the trenches. I think both guys will make the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I think barring injury or some crazy trade or just steep drop-off, I agree with you. I don't think either of these guys will be cut unless it is something like, hey, they're even and we really can go one way or the other. So maybe one guy is a tradable asset. I don't know. And I think in that scenario, you'd probably trade a Risner because you have more stability contract-wise with Brandel. But yeah, that's a whole nother thing to think about weeks from now. So
you have to like where the Vikings offensive line is at. You're returning all 5 starters.
Yeah, barring injury, you have the best tandem. You could argue a top 5 in the NFL tackle tandem.
Yep.
Sorry, I totally cut you off there, but I'm agreeing with you. Garrett Bradbury, who I was ready to write off, especially after the early season back injury last year. I figured, okay, that's got to be it. That back injury, that's going to be the career killer for him. No, he came back, and we didn't complain about him once after he came back. He kind of had a resurgence. He didn't get bullied around the same as he always had. It's like he finally got healed, or he finally figured something out. So Bradbury, I'm super stoked for. I'm excited for him.
And you've got Quessenberry, who can back him up adequately.
Well, he's a tackle. Quessenberry is.
Is he? Oh,
Yeah,
I thought he was a center.
But
Who am I thinking of that played center then? That
Schlotman, and
Schlotman.
I believe he's on like the Patriots or the Giants or something
Okay.
now,
Which
I was kind
wrong
of
guy.
bummed when he left. I think he got a good deal, so good for him. But as far as a Vikings fan, I was kind of sad when Schlotman left. But Brandell was that tackle backup, and now that's a whole other thing. Brandell's moving to the inside now, which is another thing. If they have so much confidence in him, even with a position change, that's another thing to be excited for.
Dan Feeney, that's the guy they signed in the offseason.
I just don't. I think it's a waste of a roster spot. Maybe he's a good dude, but I don't see it. He's going to be somebody that we don't talk about once the season starts, and if we do, it's because of injuries, and we're going to be saying how awful he is. Sorry, Dan. I don't know why I hate you so much.
Hot take right there. Well, anyways, all that to say, I think the offensive line is in a really good spot. I'm excited. I'm happy for some consistency. That's been a position group that has really struggled in recent seasons for the Vikings. So to have that consistency, to have those guys back in another year under Kevin O'Connell and that system, I think it's just going to make them better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, really that whole group since Hutchinson left has been such a wishy-washy, good, bad, mostly bad unit for the Vikings. And you're right. I agree with you. It's been at least consistent. It hasn't been consistently 32nd in the league the last year or two. It's been at least middle of the pack, if not a shade better. And I mean, really, how can you complain about that?
you can't.
Yeah.
You also can't complain about rumors that Cam Akers might be coming back.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely on board with bringing him back. Excuse me. One, he won't command a high value contract, which for this year, that sucks for him. But if he does come back to any team and proves that he can play, he's a perfect prove it deal candidate. So yeah, one, he won't be very expensive. Two, he's familiar with this regime. He's been with O'Connell since they were both with the Rams. And three, if he's healthy, which no news source or anything has said he's not recovered well. So if he's healthy, I mean, last year you could argue he was the best running back on the roster for all of the season until he got injured. The one awesome run that Josh Dobbs had,
He was the lead blocker
the Falcons play. Yeah, he leveled a 300-pound defensive lineman, and got up. That wasn't the play he got injured. He made that play. He's a good football player.
Agreed.
However, I think the biggest thing with him is he back to full health, and does his Achilles tear again? I feel like once you tear it twice, that's almost a career ender. If you tear one, if you get a third Achilles tear, my goodness. But
How old is Cam Akers?
I think he's 24. He might be 25. He was, I believe, a second-round pick to the
25.
Rams in 2020. So same age-ish as Justin Jefferson.
So he if he's added, if they get him, and if he's healthy and good, he would lower the average age in the running back room quite a bit, because it's on the older edge. I feel like for running back rooms, you got Myles Gaskin, who's 37, Aaron Jones is 33.
You're looking at jersey numbers.
But you're right.
Aaron Jones, he is about to be 30. I think he'll turn 30.
Aaron Jones is
sometime
29
in the season.
That's deceiving.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that was fun.
That was funny. My mistake.
But to that point, though, it is a crowded running back room. It's a room with, when your best running back, arguably, is Aaron Jones, who is about to be 30. And what have they always said about running backs at the age of 30? I mean, we heard it for a few years before Adrian left. Adrian Peterson, even, they were saying, when is he going to drop off? It's a ticking time bomb. So yeah, Cam Akers, I think he can only be a positive. It would be one thing if we were thinking they're going to sign him and they need him because they're going to put him at RB1. That's probably not what you want to do, but he can only be a positive in the room. And if he gets signed now and beats somebody out in camp, even better. So yeah, I don't know if you said it, but there was another article about on Vikings territory about him potentially re-signing. I guess Charlie Walters is saying, hey, if he passes some upcoming physical, they'll re-sign him. So that's definitely a possibility.
There you go. I'd be all for it.
Yeah. It can't hurt the team at all.
Yep. All right. One more Vikings territory article that you rounded up for us here is focusing on Danielle Hunter and Kirk Cousins and how they are still costing the team quite a bit of money, but that will be all over shortly, in about 8 months, less than a year.
So the article, again, I think it was another Dustin Baker article, definitely on VikingsTerritory.com. Go check out that website. They're awesome. Their stuff is good, and you're only going to get facts over there. So check them out. Shameless plug for somebody who's not sponsoring us, but we like them over there. So actually, keep tuned for next week. We may have a Dustin Baker appearance on the Skol Hop, so that'll be pretty fun. Anyways, this article we were talking about is really focusing on how the Vikings are one of the higher ranking teams in most dead money for this season, which what that means is, every team has a salary cap every year. It's a amount of money you're allowed to spend on your players every year. I think this year I don't even know what it is, but you're kind of looking it up. The Vikings rank pretty high in the amount of salary cap that is going towards players that aren't even on the team anymore. So that dead money. And the two biggest culprits for who's, accounting for most of that dead money is Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. I think they have somewhere around $50 million worth of dead money. So money going to players that aren't on the team. And again, most of that is going to Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter. Not that the Vikings are paying them right now, but that smarter people than me can talk about the NFL salary cap and how all that works, but they're still on the books. Essentially, those two players are still on the books. However, after this season, they'll go from one of the most dead money teams in the league to one of the least dead money teams in the league. And that article kind of talks about how that switch from most to least is really a sign of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and how he and the front office deal with contracts in comparison to how Rick Spielman and the last regime dealt with contracts. So that's a good read. You learn a little bit more about salary caps and the NFL salary than you would have before you read it. Did you read the whole thing? Did you skim some of it?
I didn't read all of it, but I got the gist. And yeah, I do like what he has to say about how this situation that the Vikings are in is an indicator of Kwesi kind of making his mark on the franchise. And Dustin has the line at the end of his article here. He says the competitive rebuild is over.
Yeah.
Like, that was always kind of the plan when Kwesi took over, was we're going to stay competitive and rebuild this team. Well, the rebuild part is over. Now it's time to be competitive.
Yep. And that's not to say that having dead money on the books it's not necessarily a bad thing. It would be bad if it was something like, I don't know, you had a quarterback that you paid $200 million and had this big old contract, and then he came out to have some huge scandal where he just was inappropriate with a bunch of massage therapists, and then you had to cut him. But you're still on the hook for those $200 million, and that's where it would be bad. However, with the whole Kirk Cousins is taking a lot of dead money situation, that was just kind of the way Rick Spielman would deal with contracts. Some people would say it's kicking the can down the road. You can pay a guy $2 now and then have him book on the books for $2,000 later. That kind of idea. But I think it's just another tool that you can use to build rosters. And if you use it too much, use these void years in contracts and this dead money. If you use it too much, it's definitely going to kill you eventually. Every dollar hits the cap. You have to account for everything sometime. But if you're able to kind of maneuver things around and stretch things around, it can be a good tool to use. One thing Dustin mentions is that the Vikings have the ability, if J.J. McCarthy ends up being at least okay, they have the ability to run the next few years with a cheap quarterback salary, which usually your quarterback is one of your highest paid players on the team, as they should be. It's the most important position. But Dustin also does bring up the valid points of Justin Jefferson. His cap hits are going to start going up and up and up after 2024. And theoretically, hopefully, the Vikings re-sign not Dalton Risner. Well, that would be nice, but Christian Darrisaw. And he's another guy that in the future will have higher cap hits. So it's all a numbers game. I'm not smart enough to understand it fully. Definitely not smart enough to explain it. So you guys can all start waking back up. We're gonna get more interesting on the podcast here, but definitely read that article.
It is interesting to know, and we'll have the link to all three of those articles in the description, both on Spotify and YouTube. So if you're interested in that, make sure you go check out Vikings Territory. But today's July 1st. We're recording on Monday, July 1st, and that's Bobby Bonilla Day.
Yeah.
Which is, we've referenced this on the show, but I don't know that we've ever gone into detail about him. But he is a 61-year-old former New York Mets baseball player who gets paid every year $1.1 million on July 1st. Mm-hmm. And he will continue to get paid that amount until 2035.
Yeah, and that was a whole deal. I don't know the ins and outs, but enough to be able to explain the high-level version of it. Basically, the Mets, when they re-signed him, he apparently was a pretty good player, but in order to absorb that contract that they were going to give him, they just basically said, like, hey, for the next however long, 50 years, however long it was, we're gonna spread out your salary so that we can still sign you and still have a really good player on our roster, but you're just gonna be on our books forever, basically. Still another 11 years from now. And that was did you see when he signed that contract? However long ago it was? Was it in the 80s?
I would have to guess it would be that long ago. I mean, he hasn't played in a long time.
And maybe it was the 90s. I mean, it was a long time ago, and yeah, that is probably not a very smart financial decision. I think Shohei Ohtani got a somewhat, not as extreme, but a kind of ish similar type of lengthened deal from the Dodgers. I might be wrong on that.
It was in 2000 is when he got
I was way off.
The payday.
Okay. So they basically signed a guy for a few years and stretched it out for 35 years. That would be one thing I'd be upset if the Vikings signed anybody to a kind of contract like that. I don't even think it's allowed anymore.
Yeah, it's just not really an NFL thing either. No. Like, maybe that happens in baseball still a little bit, but...
Well, their salaries are guaranteed too. NFL is guaranteed to a certain amount, but not all of it.
There's not nearly the salary cap restrictions that there are in Major League Baseball, and team budgets are different in baseball than they are in football. So, yeah, baseball is kind of a whole different animal. It's still one of the reasons why Moneyball is my favorite movie.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting topic that can get boring, and you have to have at least a specific understanding of it. And I have like 1% enough understanding of it.
And I have like 0.1%.
That's giving me way too much credit there.
No. I'm just trying to be real here.
Either way, the cap is a myth, and these teams will sign your favorite players if they're good enough. Like Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Who has signed his first mega deal. He'll get another one for sure.
As long as he stays healthy and keeps producing, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Skol. Skol.
Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures. Step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.